Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super Fantified. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Demon Lord 2099, Season 1, Episode 6. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So, picking up where the last episode left off, we had this really interesting conversation between Marcus and Machina that answers a question I had previously where I was like, why did Marcus never go after Machina? Like, why now? Like, I was like, did he wait for Vettel to return? Turns out he didn't even know Machina was still alive. He assumed she was dead. He only found out she was like, because to be fair, it's like when Vettel came to him, it was like he's probably always keeping an eye out, waiting for Vettel to come find him, but he ultimately did anyway. But yeah. I mean, I guess like last episode when or not last episode, but the episode before last or whatever, when Machina was caught on camera, like that was probably because she's always probably done a very good job of. I mean, she's never had any reason to interact with Marcus. She's known to avoid him, so I guess she just have avoided him these past like 500 years. But it's just interesting knowing because like he was keeping an eye on Vettel, so that was probably like the first time like they were keeping an eye on him and found him where he was staying. And well, I don't know if that episode where we saw her get caught on camera, I don't know if like whether it was a drone or whatever that was watching. I don't know if that was like the first time Marcus found out, or maybe he had found out about her earlier and was just waiting for a moment where Machina and Vettel were not around each other to strike, whatever the case may be. But I was like, yeah, that answered that question. I thought that was fascinating. But also, he's also explaining the immortal furnace to Machina, because obviously Takahashi and Graham and Vettel know about it, but she was taken before they could fill her in on everything that's going on with the furnace. So she's hearing about it the first time. Also, I have to say this whole thing just because obviously in this episode she shows like once again I guess what might be her true form. I don't know which version of Machina, whether it's like her platinum hair or whether the red hair is like her true form, whatever. Because I was like, oh, maybe like her platinum hair form is like her seal form, right? I feel so stupid because if you look at the intro, like I always talk like this. I think in my head, I always remember the second time Machina pops up with her red hair, not in the opening where we have Machina with her platinum hair, and then behind her in that same shot is her with her red hair. It's super obvious it's the same character, especially when you look at her face. It just never clicked in my head. Like I said, I just assumed because I kept forgetting about it there and only remembering like the second time she pops up in the intro. But either way. So I just also wanted to include that because I felt so stupid for it because it's super obvious that's supposed to be the same character and it just never clicked in my head. But yeah, Marcus kind of explains an interesting thing of immortals can't physically die, but their souls can basically spiritually die, and that's what happens with the furnace. The furnace burns away their physical body, but it eventually burns away their soul. So every immortal, like, who has been put in a furnace, maybe there was a point in time you probably could save them, maybe not, but the moment their soul is gone, they're gone. And now he's basically telling her about like two people. It's like, oh, their friendship, or they were in love, and it was like seeing that like their thoughts were only of each other at the end. It's like, man, Marcus is a sociopath. You know, he's laying into it. He's just such a twisted bastard. And so, once again, all of this is because he's kind of saying he wants to basically wipe out every other immortal so that he's the only one left so that he could be crowned the true Demon Lord. But I'm like, what compelled him to be like that? I guess like in the past, maybe because he kept like he bowed down to Vettel not because he respected Vettel, where it seems like everyone else, including like all the Dark Peers, it seems like he's the only, because he was a Dark Peer, wasn't he? Or maybe he wasn't. Maybe he was just a straight up ally. But I assume as powerful as he is, you would assume he was one of the Dark Peers, and I think he was. But either way, it seemed like the others like respected Vettel. He seems to be the one that's like, nah, I don't. I only went along with it because I kind of had no choice. Now that Vettel is no longer the picture, now I'm going to take what I believe to be my rightful position as king or lord of the demons, the demon lord and stuff. So that was fascinating. Just kind of all that insight. And obviously Machina making a promise that she'll be the one that ends up killing Marcus. I hope she gets that opportunity, but I think it's going to be Vettel in the end. But regardless, the main crux of the episode revolves around Graham fighting Kohara. you know, and it's just this situation of like, oh yeah, they reference Zeno, and it's like, oh, because Veto was like, be careful, her sword skills are on par. No, I think he was like, yeah, she's pretty tough, but then Graham, it's like, oh, she's a good swordsman. It's like, well, look, I think he references beating Zeno, and he was like, oh, Veto was like, all right, I forgot you were on par with Zeno, because Zeno was kind of like, I guess, considered the strongest swordsman or whatever. Or I think maybe, no, I think, I'm mixing stuff up. I'm so sorry. Vettel made comparisons between Kinohara and Zeno, but then Graham's like, oh, it's a good thing I beat Zeno then. He was like, oh, right, I did forget about that. And he, before he leaves, he's like, yo, you have to promise me you won't die. Also, I do really appreciate Kinohara's fighting style. I mean, it's a very specific, like, once again, I am a sucker for the whole drawing and sheathing your sword, your katana. That is, like, the coolest thing ever. Once again, why I'm so in love with the 8 Leaves style from the Trail/Kaseki series. Once again, specifically Rin Schwarzer's moveset is probably one of my favorite movesets. In the Trail series in general, but one of my favorite video game movesets, especially just all the different skills he has. But I'm a big fan of like sheathing your sword and then drawing it again. But that's how she activates like her like white lightning magic. I thought this was also an interesting thing too. I don't think this had come up in previous episodes. I think it's such a... I wonder, is this something adaptive from the light novel, or is it like an artistic choice or directional choice they chose for the anime, that for whatever reason, Kinohara says, not a lot, but like every other sentence or so, she's saying 1 or 2 words in English, which I was like, oh, that's interesting. Because I was like, I would assume like... I don't know, maybe that's like just supposed to be like a character quirk, or maybe that, like I said, that was just a direction the voice actress was given. But I thought, I mean, there's plenty of times when like during an anime you'll hear like English splashed in, because I think it's just probably maybe it's easier to say the English word rather than it is the Japanese word, because maybe there isn't an actual Japanese word for this particular thing. I mean, obviously some things there's not, but I don't know. I just thought that was so interesting because it didn't happen once or twice. It happened pretty consistently with her talking to Graham, which I thought was so fascinating. I was so curious whether or not he'd be able to keep up with her, because she is pretty fast. But yeah, Graham, like, despite like him, she's having like this katana. He has like a kind of basically a broadsword, but he's still pretty swift. I mean, interesting too, considering like he's wearing armor and everything. But it's because like we only saw a fraction of his fight with Vettel in the first episode, so we never saw like what he's really like when he really kind of like really goes through it. And he was, you know, keeping pace with Kinohara this entire fight, because that was interesting, because like, I mean, it seems some moments like he might have been caught off guard or being pushed back, but he was never exhausted by the end of the fight. He kept a pretty even tempo throughout the fight, which I thought was kind of the point, showing how he's like, yeah, my skills might have rusted a little bit, but well, let me show that they haven't really rusted a lot. So, especially when Kinohara pulls out her, was it Magi armor, which looks so badass. I'm like, I mean, my mind, I'm like, for whatever reason, that screams like Metal Gear. Specifically, it kind of gives me Raiden Metal Gear Rising type of vibes. I mean, I guess it kind of makes sense too, considering like the Magi Gears is probably, like, once again, my mind immediately went to like Divine Knights and Panzer Soldaten from Trails, but then it's like, well, the probably obvious choice would be like Metal Gears from freaking Metal Gear. Once again, it's not a franchise I know that well. I picked up a little here and there, like watching people like Metal Gear. Like Rising is probably the one I know the most about, you know, with riding and stuff. But yeah, I mean, especially her using the katana and it having to revolve around lightning, there's even more Raiden comparisons in that regard. But yeah, definitely like just the slickness of it, because it's like the 5th generation, and so it can only last as long as the person has mana. So I mean, I really love the fight, just them like, it's just a fight of speed and strength, of like them like sliding against the walls, and it's a pretty epic fight. And like I said, it's pretty even all around, even when she does her thing of like drawing her blade and sheathing it to like activate her magic. So, but even then, like, the most frustrating thing for Kinohara is like, right, I have the best technology. I'm up against Graham. He's an antiquated hero from like 500 years ago. He has a very old-fashioned Familia, so like he doesn't even have the most recent version of it. His sword has got rust all over it, and I love him being like, right, that's what you see. It's like, I guess because he hasn't used its true power in so long, he hasn't had a reason to, but he's like, yeah, my sword like will release its power whenever there's someone that needs my help or needs saving. And so he calls out to his sword, what's it like, Exorde or something like that, and then it glows like gold, and he's just like, right, the technique I use to best the demon lord, and he uses it against her. It gave me like Xenoblade Chronicles vibes when he did it. I don't know, I probably didn't think about it as much in episode 1 because it is the same technique, the final blow, but it definitely, like, now sitting here with her, I'm like, oh, it definitely gave me Xenoblade Chronicle vibes, whether it's Shulk with the Monado or whether it's Rex with Pyra and or Mithra. It just gave me that type of vibe with just like a large beam from the blade and slashing, which I'm like, I'm always a fan of that type of stuff. But yeah, it doesn't kill Kohara, which I'm like, oh, cool, she's going to be sticking around. But yeah, she got bested, which even he's like, oh, I guess, like, you know, it's like, right, she chose to release her power, because he's like, kind of, he says, like, how fickle his sword is, and it's like, normally it'd be enough to do some severe damage, but the fact is that it didn't kill her. He's like, yeah, I guess it's, you know, it's not as strong as it once was. But yeah, he tells Kinohara, because she's like, why did I lose? He's like, no, it's more so about why did I win? And it's like, because he's like, yeah, you had the best technology, this and that. But he's like, at the end of the day, you can't beat the 500 years of experience of battle. Like, that does matter in the long run. Because he'd even used a tactic at one point in time where he was like, oh yeah, that's a tactic I picked up from, like, one of my fights in the past. He's like, yeah, 500 years old, and this tactic still works. Tactics can still matter and can still compensate and close the gap between, you know, the gap that exists because of technology and the changing of the times. I do appreciate, like, the fact, I mean, obviously, this is a very fantastical series, even with the science fiction of it. It is the blending of science and magic, but, like, yeah, him utilizing magic a lot. Because, of course, he would, but I don't know why. It's kind of, I guess, like, if I had to compare to say anything, it'd be kind of like Star Ocean, because Star Ocean is one of the few, like, franchises I can think of that is the blending of magic and science fiction. It's a heavily science fiction series with franchise with magic in it. So I'm not saying there aren't others, but it's like I never thought about that till just now, because I was like, yeah, I guess, like, what's it called, symbology? I believe that's what it is. I don't know if that's in all of, I don't remember if that's in all of the Star Oceaners, or that specifically the planet you're mainly on in Star Ocean 3 till the end of the time. But yeah, like, Kinohara's like, right, go ahead and kill me. But he's like, Graham's like, no, my only job was to stop you from going after Vetol. I've done that. You can't go after him, so we're going to chill here. Because she's like, right, you should go help him, because Vetol can't beat Marcus. It's like, not only does he have, like, a better, like, because Vetol doesn't have a familiar, he'll never be able to beat Marcus. It's like, Marcus is the strongest. He's stronger than me, because she's like, right, during our first encounter, like, Vetol couldn't do anything against me, and I'm nowhere near strong enough to fight Marcus. But it's like, oh, you don't know about his trump card, do you? Which I was like, oh, that's interesting. That, yeah, it's like, he's like, oh, I guess many people don't. I guess, like, whatever it was, Vetol probably rarely has had to ever use it. He probably had to use it against Graham, because it's like, yo, this is my ultimate rival. We're both going all out. He's an even match for me. I got to bring out all the stops. So I'm curious, like, what that trump card is, because it's definitely not the sword thing, because if it was, like, he's already used that. So, I mean, because he's also got Takahashi, cooking something up too. So I'm curious what that ends up being in the long run. But yeah, just a fascinating thing to find out what this trump card is, because he was like, oh, even Marcus doesn't know about it. Makes me wonder, does Machina not know about it either? Is it something he's even kept from her? So, but yeah, Kinohara is definitely not going to be loyal to Marcus going forward. I could definitely see her switching sides, not necessarily chilling with Vetol, but maybe she starts kicking it with Graham out of respect and kind of like being his assistant or something, or being kind of like, as a swords person, it feels like, I don't know, it feels like there's a kinship there that I'm curious. I don't know. We'll see what Kinohara decides to do when it's all said and done, because Marcus did try to kill her, because I guess it's like, right, you failed me, and if you fail me, well, I'm getting to the point where I'm about to become the true demon lord. I won't need you anymore in general, but maybe it's also because you lost and you're no longer a useful tool to me, that I'm going to throw you away. Marcus doesn't care about anyone but himself, loyalty or not. So despite how loyal Kinohara is to him, so I'm curious to know, is it, hey, I was always going to get rid of you, or I'm specifically getting rid of you now because you lost? So Graham gets up and he's like, oh, I guess I still got one more task the hero still got one more task in front of him. But all the while this is going down, Marcus is ready to throw Machina into the furnace, and her last thoughts are like, you know, my lord, take care of yourself. Don't just eat udon every day because that's not good for you. Wash your clothes regularly. I know you're working all the time streaming, but stretch and, move your body every once in a while. And just like lastly, she's like, I loved you. And it's like, that's pretty obvious how she felt about him. And I don't know if he's quite figured it out. He's like, he knows that she's like, obviously she's very important to him. I don't know if he's figured out how he feels about her, but like she's irreplaceable in his eyes. I just don't know how far, like where on the spectrum that irreplaceability lies, of like whether he views her in that lens or not. But yeah, obviously coming in for the save at the very end, which I thought was beautiful, especially considering we know that's how they first met, was her falling into a volcano and him saving her. So the exact same thing all these years later. So and he's like, oh, like, you give up too easy. That's a bad habit of yours. But he's like, yeah, I'm here to save you, Machina, So thought that was beautiful. So I'm excited to see where the next episode takes us. Obviously, it's going to be the clash between I guess who's going to be the true Demon Lord, the guy coming for the throne, or the real guy that he plans on taking the crown from. So that's going to be exciting to see where the next episode ultimately ends up taking us, going forward with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.